So imagine the power grid collapses tomorrow, like right in the middle of a 110-degree heat wave.
Oh, that sounds miserable.
Right, and you check your phone, and you see that you have exactly $1,000 of universal basic income sitting safely in your digital wallet.
Okay, but what does that money actually buy you right in that moment?
Exactly. What does it buy you if there is no shade, no clean water, and no working air conditioning within the 50-mile radius?
I mean, absolutely nothing.
Nothing at well. And today, we are looking at this radical, just profoundly bizarre manifesto that looks at that exact scenario. And it calls your bank account a categorical fallacy.
Yeah, it really does not hold back.
Not at all. We are jumping into a deep dive today, going through a stack of sources from a deeply weird corner of the internet known as the Stenegrosphere.
Such a strange name, yeah.
It really is. And specifically, we are focusing on this massive, sprawling document called the Pandemonium debate.
Which is, I'd argue, one of the most intense structural teardowns of modern techno-optimism that we've seen in recent years.
Oh, without a doubt.
Like, it looks at the trajectory we are on specifically, this collision between infinite artificial intelligence and a very finite, rapidly degrading biological environment.
Yeah.
And it basically decides that our entire socioeconomic operating system needs a hard reboot.
Like, we are talking about completely rewriting our social contracts here.
Right, from the ground up.
Taking the conversation away from abstract finance,
Yeah.
pulling it away from zero-sum geopolitics, and forcing us to get our hands literally into the dirt.
Literally into the dirt, yeah.
But before we get in the weeds on this, I do want to establish some parameters for you, the listener, because the material we are exploring today is highly charged.
Oh, very much so.
It takes aggressive aim at centrist political movements like No Labels. It critiques specific figures like Andrew Yang, and it ruthlessly dismantles both left-wing and right-wing paradigms.
Nobody is safe in this document.
Nobody. So we're not here to endorse any political side or validate the text's specific attacks on real-world politicians.
Right, that's not the goal here at all.
Our mission is strictly to explore the underlying structural and philosophical arguments this source presents. Because, honestly, the framework it proposes is just undeniably fascinating.
I completely agree. The ideas themselves are what matter here. You know, the text uses these contemporary political figures more as, like, archetypes.
Like stand-ins for larger systems of thought.
Exactly. It's analyzing the architecture of how we govern ourselves, and it finds that architecture fundamentally lacking in the face of what it calls thermodynamic reality.
Thermodynamic reality. I love that phrase. So to understand how this text diagnoses our reality, we really first have to talk about how it's written.
Yeah, the format is wild.
Because it is not a white paper. It's not a standard essay. It is formatted as this chaotic, multi-voice transcript of a debate among a group called the Multitude.
Right. It reads like a leaked script from a very intense, very angry board meeting.
But a board meeting taking place inside a collective consciousness.
Yes. The author or authors, we don't really know, use this format to simulate what they call a pandemonium architecture.
Pandemonium architecture. Okay,
Yeah.
break that down for me.
Sure.
Because when I first read that phrase, it just sounded like a fancy way of saying everyone is yelling at once.
Well, it kind of is, but there's a reason for it. It is a deliberate stylistic choice meant to mirror how complex systems actually process information.
So what is the actual cognitive or systemic theory behind presenting an argument this way? Like, why the yelling?
So the concept originates in early cognitive science and computer science. If you think about how the human brain processes a sudden, complex threat.
Okay, like seeing a shadow in the dark.
Exactly. There isn't a single polite voice of reason dictating a step-by-step plan. Instead, you have distinct neural subsystems that operate almost independently.
Oh, interesting.
Your amygdala spots that shadow and immediately screams, "Predator, run!" But your visual cortex is simultaneously analyzing the shadow and shouting, "No, it's just a tree branch."
And maybe your stomach is chiming in too.
Right. Meanwhile, your stomach is signaling, "I am depleted, we need calories." These different subsystems, often referred to in computer science as demons, they don't compromise with each other. They don't have a polite committee meeting.
They just loudly broadcast their single absolute priority.
Exactly. And the conscious mind, the executive function, is basically the hidden observer that sits at the top of this hierarchy.
Taking in all these screaming signals.
Yes, taking them in, measuring their intensity, and synthesizing them into an action.
So instead of a polite debate where everyone waters down their opinions to reach a middle ground, It's a system where everyone is forced to be as radical and absolute as possible about their specific need.
You nailed it. And the synthesis only happens after the collision of those absolutes.
That makes so much sense. So the text is suggesting that our society, our internet discourse, is just a macro version of this pandemonium architecture.
Precisely. The chaos and the yelling online aren't necessarily a bug of the system.
They are the processing mechanism.
Right. You can't find the truth without the friction. So the text introduces us to the demons of this collective societal brain, giving them distinct voices and archetypes.
Let's introduce this cast of characters for the listener because they represent the different competing priorities we all feel right now.
They really do.
First, we have the architect. This is the voice of pure structure. The architect is constantly talking in terms of, 14-year timelines, infrastructural blueprints, load-bearing constraints.
Yeah, the architect represents our desire for control and long-term planning.
Like the part of us that loves spreadsheets.
Exactly. It is the part of the collective consciousness that believes if we just design the right policy framework, we can engineer our way out of the crisis.
But constantly interrupting the architect is the maniac.
Oh, the maniac.
And in the original transcripts, the maniac's dialogue is almost entirely written in all caps.
Just visually screaming at you.
Right. The maniac is furious, screaming about corporate rot, systemic corruption, and the absolute absurdity of building more data centers while the world burns.
The maniac serves as the societal alarm bell. This archetype represents the raw, unvarnished panic and outrage of the populace.
No plans, just panic.
Right. The maniac doesn't have a plan. The maniac just sees the fire and refuses to let anyone pretend the room isn't burning. It is the rejection of polite normalization.
Which makes the next voice so incredibly jarring.
It's hilarious, actually.
It is. Right in the middle of the maniac screaming about the apocalypse, you have the hedonist.
Just popping in.
Yeah, and the hedonist really only chimes in to ask one thing. Can we get boba tea?
It seems trivial at first, almost like a joke about shortened attention spans or consumer culture.
Right, like who cares about boba during the end of the world?
But the hedonist is actually a profound archetype. It represents the baseline human desire for comfort, pleasure, and normalcy.
Oh, that makes sense.
While the architect and the maniac are fighting over the macro survival of the species, the hedonist is asking the micro question.
What is the actual texture of the life we are trying to save?
Exactly. Are we just surviving to suffer, or is there room for joy?
I love that. And then you have voices trying to detach from the panic entirely, like the ascetic, who urges everyone to focus on their breath.
To step away from the ego-driven need to win the political game, yeah.
Right, and to focus on the process rather than the outcome. And you also have the pragmatist and the protector, who are entirely focused on realpolitik.
They are the ones asking, okay, how do we defend this new system from a hostile military power?
But the most crucial voice in the entire document,
Yes.
the one that anchors this entire chaotic debate, is a character named Guylis Duncan.
Yes, Guylis Duncan.
Guylis Duncan is wild. She doesn't even enter the conversation normally.
No, she does not.
The text describes her entrances as acoustic interference created by a jaw harp. The transcript literally spells out boing, boing, boing before she speaks.
It is a bizarre literary device, I will admit, but it serves a very specific function. Every time the other archetypes get too lost in their own abstractions, whether it's the architect obsessing over a blueprint or the maniac getting lost in a paranoid rant, Guylis Duncan strikes the jaw harp to break the trance.
Like a physical wake-up call.
Right. She brings the entire conversation violently back to physical reality.
She's the voice of the dirt.
Literally.
She doesn't care about economic theory. She talks about the temperature of the asphalt. She talks about rescue dogs needing shade. She talks about the water table.
She represents the biological carrying capacity of the earth. She is the physical constraint that none of the other archetypes can negotiate with.
Because you can debate a policy, but you cannot debate the fact that a dog will die if the ambient temperature exceeds its biological limits.
You cannot negotiate with physics.
Right. So this is a really complex way to frame an argument.
It is a lot to take in.
If we have all these competing absolute values, the architect demanding structure, the maniac demanding revolution, the hedonist demanding boba, and Guylis demanding shade, how does this multitude actually arrive at a consensus?
Well,
Because in the real world, a system like this just looks like gridlock. It looks like a chaotic trading floor where everyone is screaming buy or sell at the top of their lungs, but nobody is actually communicating.
but think about that trading floor analogy. On a trading floor, the aggregate of all that screaming, eventually produces a highly accurate market price.
Okay, fair point.
The chaos resolves into a single actionable data point. The multitude operates the same way. The text argues that true progress doesn't come from the maniac and the architect sitting down and compromising on a watered-down, ineffective half measure.
So it's not about compromise.
No. Progress happens when the sheer force of these competing absolutes collides and forges an entirely new structural constraint.
A new paradigm that addresses the underlying physics of the problem, rather than just the superficial symptoms.
Exactly.
And the first major paradigm shift that this multitude manages to hammer out is a complete, ruthless teardown of universal basic income.
Which is huge.
It is fascinating because UBI has become the darling policy of the tech world and forward-thinking economists right now.
Oh yeah, it's pitched as the ultimate safety net for the AI revolution.
Right, but this text absolutely despises it.
The multitude's critique of UBI is where the rubber really meets the road in terms of their philosophy. The architect leads the charge by labeling universal basic income a categorical fallacy.
A categorical fallacy, because the architect argues that UBI relies on a closed-loop hallucination of the economy, right?
Yes, a hallucination.
It assumes that if you just inject 1,000 digital dollars into a citizen's bank account every month, that mathematically guarantees their survival.
Yeah.
It treats money as magic.
It really does. And then the maniac takes that structural critique and weaponizes it politically.
Oh, of course.
The maniac calls UBI hush money orchestrated by corporate bankers and tech oligarchs.
The imagery the maniac uses there is incredibly bleak.
That's terrible.
The idea is that they give you just enough digital tokens to keep you docile, sitting in a 525 square foot pod, ordering mass-produced consumer goods on your phone.
While outside your window, they are bulldozing the remaining arable land and draining the aquifers to cool their massive AI data centers.
Right, so what the multitude is driving at here is a fundamental concept called the thermodynamic argument against fiat currency.
Yes. And to understand their fury, we really have to look at what money actually is.
Okay, let's do it.
Fiat currency is not energy, it is not food, it is not shelter, it is simply an abstract pointer, a claim on future energy and future resources.
It's just a ledger entry, like a dollar bill doesn't have calories and a Bitcoin doesn't generate physical warmth.
Exactly. Which brings us to the concept of energy return on investment, or EROI.
EROI, right.
Historically, currency was tethered to physical reality, like gold or silver, something that required physical labor and energy to extract.
But we decoupled that.
We did. When we decoupled money from the physical world, we created a system where we can print trillions of abstract pointers infinitely. But the physical world, the topsoil, the fresh water, the stable climate required to grow crops, is entirely finite.
So if the carrying capacity of the environment is collapsing, all the digital money in the world becomes completely useless.
That is the core of their thesis. If a local government allows tech companies to pave over the last functioning aquifer, and the local agricultural system collapses, printing an extra $1,000 for every resident does absolutely nothing to solve the thermodynamic deficit.
Because the food simply doesn't exist to be bought.
Right. Or it becomes so energetically expensive to import that the UBI is just eaten by hyperinflation overnight.
And this is where Gaylis Duncan, the voice of the dirt, sums this up perfectly in the text.
Oh, I love this quote.
She strikes her jaw harp and says, fiat currency is a coin that forgot what it was supposed to measure. And she points out that a rescue dog doesn't care if you have Apple Pay. A dog only cares if there is shade, if there is water in the bowl, and if the pack is safe.
Because humans are biological creatures subject to the exact same thermodynamic laws as the dog.
We just like to pretend we aren't.
We have built an incredibly complex economic hallucination to convince ourselves that we are separate from the dirt. And the multitude is saying that the hallucination is ending.
Which leads to their proposed solution. They argue that we have to replace universal basic income with something they call universal basic life, or UBL.
Universal basic life.
So what does the transition from UBI to UBL actually look like on the ground?
Universal basic life drops the abstraction entirely. Instead of a government guaranteeing a baseline of fiat currency, which, fluctuates in value and is subject to the whims of the market and the environment, UBL is a baseline guarantee of physical, biological reality.
So instead of $1,000, we are talking about a guarantee of actual nutritious calories. We are talking about sustainable, weather-resistant housing. We are talking about community infrastructure, clean water, and local energy grids that don't fail when the temperature spikes.
It shifts the societal guarantee from the financial realm to the thermodynamic realm. It is a commitment to maintaining the physical carrying capacity of the human animal.
I see the logic, but let me push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
Because the immediate counterargument is going to be about human agency.
Sure.
The entire appeal of handing out cash, like the libertarian defense of UBI, is that it maximizes freedom. If I give you $1,000, you get to decide what you need most.
You have the choice.
Right. Maybe you need to pay off debt. Maybe you want to start a business. Maybe you want to buy organic groceries. By dictating that the state or the community provides housing and food instead of liquid cash, aren't we infantilizing people?
That's a common critique.
Aren't we stripping them of their autonomy to make their own choices?
Well, the multitude anticipates that exact objection. And their counterargument is deeply rooted in systems theory.
Okay, how so?
They would argue that you are conflating consumer choice with actual survival agency.
So the idea that having money means having freedom is the fallacy they're attacking.
Think about the thermodynamics again. If you are standing in a desert and it is 120 degrees and the local water table is dry, having $1 million in a briefcase does not give you the agency to magically synthesize water.
Right. The money is useless.
Your biology will fail regardless of your purchasing power. The text argues that true agency, the ability to think, to create, to participate in a democracy, requires a stable biological foundation.
It sounds like being stranded on a desert island with a chest full of Monopoly money versus being stranded with a shovel and a bag of seeds.
That is a great analogy.
The money gives you the illusion that you possess value.
Yeah.
But only the seeds can actually interact with the biological reality of the island to keep you alive. You can't eat the paper.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. The multitude argues that the tech elites push UBI because it costs them nothing to print abstract tokens,
while allowing them to continue monopolizing the physical layer of reality.
Right. The land, the water, the computing power. UBL forces society to secure the perimeter of human survival first. Only once the biological baseline is secured can abstract agency actually exist.
Okay, assuming we accept that universal basic life is the necessary life jacket, the obvious hurdle is implementation.
Always the hardest part.
How do you force a deeply entrenched, highly profitable global system to suddenly stop hoarding digital wealth and start building sustainable physical infrastructure?
It's not like they'll just volunteer to do it.
Because the current power structures aren't just going to voluntarily hand over the deed to the physical world.
No, they weren't. And this is where the text transitions from philosophical diagnosis to actual systemic engineering. To force this transition, the multitude proposes a new foundational protocol.
And they call it the proof of regeneracy.
The proof of regeneracy, yes.
Now, we hear proof of work and proof of stake all the time in the context of cryptocurrency and blockchain.
Right.
Proof of work requires massive server farms burning through megawatts of electricity just to solve arbitrary math puzzles to validate a digital coin. It is notoriously extractive.
Very extractive. The multitude takes that concept and inverts it entirely. Proof of regeneracy physically tethers the computational power of artificial intelligence and the creation of digital value directly to the health of the local soil and water.
The mechanics they describe are really fascinating. The text refers to these massive corporate AIs as the Unwinder.
The Unwinder.
Right. If the Unwinder wants to run a colossal multivariable simulation, if a tech company wants to spin up a new data center that requires 10 megawatts of continuous power, they cannot just go to the open market and buy that electricity with fiat currency.
Under this protocol, their computational allowance is directly throttled by the local biology. They must earn the right to compute.
How do they earn it? The text says if the algorithm doesn't make the dirt wetter, it doesn't get to spin.
I love how blunt that is.
It's great. It means the tech company must literally engineer a physical solution to increase the carrying capacity of the land they sit on.
They have to restore the local watershed.
Right. They have to fund and build systems that deepen the root structures of the local flora to prevent soil erosion. They have to prove that their physical footprint leaves the local biosphere mathematically healthier than it was before they turned the servers on.
It creates this symbiotic feedback loop. The more advanced the AI wants to become, the more intensely it must optimize and heal the physical world around it to secure the energy it needs to run.
It forces the abstract intelligence to become a custodian of the biological reality.
Exactly.
Which is a beautiful concept on paper. But
Yeah.
practically speaking, how on earth do you enforce that? You have a trillion-dollar multinational tech conglomerate that wants to build a massive server farm in a desert valley.
They have infinite lobbying money.
They have the best lawyers in the world. How does a society realistically impose a proof of regeneracy protocol on an entity that powerful?
This leads to what is perhaps the most strategically brilliant section of the entire Pandemonium debate. The multitude argues internally about the delivery mechanism for this idea.
They debate how to get this protocol enacted into law.
Right. The architect suggests pitching it to centrist political movements, specifically calling out groups like No Labels or figures like Andrew Yang.
Because Yang built his entire political brand around universal basic income and the threat of automation.
Exactly. The logic being, these are the people who talk about systems and AI, so surely they are the ones who can legislate this.
But the multitude reaches a very cynical yet highly pragmatic consensus about national politicians.
Very cynical.
They decide that you should give the white paper to figures like Andrew Yang, but you must do so with the absolute understanding that they will not comprehend the depth of it.
The text explicitly labels national politicians as amplifiers, not installers.
Amplifiers.
It says that a celebrity politician will stand on a debate stage, hold up a copy of the Proof of Regeneracy Protocol, say some buzzwords about the environment and AI, and the tech elites in the audience will clap politely.
Because it sounds good.
And then, the next morning, those same elites will go right back to building extractive fossil fuel burning data centers because national politics is largely theatrical.
It is a spectacle designed to absorb and neutralize radical ideas.
Exactly.
So if the politicians on the debate stage are just the amplifiers, who are the actual installers of this protocol?
The multitude points directly to the most mundane, unglamorous levels of local bureaucracy.
I found this part so interesting.
They point to the municipal zoning boards, the county water commissions, the community land trusts.
You're right.
They argue that you do not campaign on proof of regeneracy as a national political platform. You bypass the theater of Washington entirely, and you hardwire the protocol directly into local building codes.
This is a profound insight into how structural power actually operates. A trillion-dollar tech company can buy a senator. They can lobby a federal agency. But when it comes down to physically breaking ground to build a massive server farm, they still have to get a permit from a local zoning board to hook up to the municipal water supply.
This is it. This is the leverage.
I want to make sure I am grasping the scale of this for the listener. Are we seriously concluding that the ultimate leverage point to save the biosphere and regulate artificial intelligence isn't happening at the United Nations, but it's actually going down at a Tuesday night HOA meeting in a suburban community center?
In terms of actual physical friction, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it is wild.
You can have all the offshore capital in the world, but your servers exist in physical space. They generate immense heat, and they require massive amounts of local water to cool down.
The local water is the key.
The Municipal Water Commission is the choke point. If a group of local citizens successfully passes a county bylaw that states no industrial water hookups will be approved for computational facilities unless the facility legally binds itself to a proof of regeneracy standard,
Then what happens?
the tech company is entirely blocked. They cannot run their AI without the water.
It's like a bouncer at a nightclub, but instead of charging a cover fee in cash, the bouncer hands you a mop and says, you can't come in and drink until you clean the floors of the entire block.
I love that visual.
And the tech companies who are desperate to get inside and run their algorithms have no choice but to start mopping. They have to start cleaning the environment just to gain access to the physical resources they need.
Which turns the bureaucracy into a weapon for ecological defense.
Right.
While the national media is endlessly debating the philosophy of AI ethics on cable news, a civil engineer at a local water board has already written the constraint into the plumbing code.
It just becomes a fait accompli.
Yes. It is decentralized, unglamorous, and incredibly resilient to top-down lobbying.
Tying AI to local dirt through municipal zoning makes perfect sense domestically. I can visualize how a county in Arizona or a land trust in Oregon could enforce this.
Sure.
But the moment you propose throttling technology or imposing strict environmental constraints on industry, you hit the ultimate realpolitik wall. you hit the geopolitical objection.
Ah, yes, the classic China threat argument.
Exactly. The immediate response from the defense sector is always, well, this is all very nice and utopian, but if the United States voluntarily restricts its AI development to protect its topsoil, China will not.
Right, they'll just keep building.
They will extract every resource they have to build a superintelligence, they will win the AI arms race, and they will dominate the globe. How does the multitude handle the geopolitical reality of hostile state actors?
The multitude tackles this head-on, and they label the China threat argument in this specific context as a categorical failure of imagination. They argue that this panic is entirely predicated on a flawed paradigm that they call the extraction model.
Broke down the extraction model for us. Why is it a flawed way to look at geopolitics?
The extraction model assumes that all resources, and therefore all global power dynamics, are a zero-sum game.
Okay.
It operates on the belief that the only way to ensure national security and economic growth is to beat your rivals to the bottom of the barrel.
Like it's a race to extract the fastest.
Exactly. If there is only so much oil, so much lithium, so much computational power to be had, then any self-imposed constraint is strategically suicidal. You have to extract faster than the other guy, or you lose.
But the multitude points out a fundamental biological truth that disrupts that logic. They argue that the foundational resources of universal basic life, sunlight, healthy soil, and clean water are not inherently zero-sum.
Right.
If you manage an ecosystem regeneratively, the resources don't deplete. They compound.
They grow.
Yeah. A healthy forest generates its own microclimate, which retains more water, which supports more life.
So the true enemy isn't a rival nation state. The true enemy is the extraction game itself.
Because the game has a dead end.
Because if everyone plays the zero-sum extraction game to its logical conclusion, the bottom of that barrel isn't victory. The bottom of the barrel is the thermodynamic heat death of the planet. It is global ecological collapse.
They make a deeply pragmatic point about global stability here, too.
What's that?
If China, or any massive global power, is hungry, desperate, and operating on degraded land with failing agriculture, they're forced to be aggressive.
Yes.
They're forced to extract resources from the rest of the world to survive. But a fed, housed nation, a nation whose soil is alive and whose local energy grids are resilient, that is a nation that can actually participate in a stable global commons.
The pragmatist archetype is the one who really drives this point home in the text.
Because it's a real politic argument.
Exactly. The pragmatist understands that you can't sell a policy based purely on ecological morality. You have to sell it on national security. The pragmatist argues that adopting the proof of regeneracy isn't a handicap. It is the ultimate strategic advantage.
It makes a nation uncrushable.
Think about the vulnerabilities of the extraction model. If your entire society relies on hyper-complex, fragile global supply chains to import food, energy, and technology,
You're at the mercy of the supply chain.
you are incredibly vulnerable to blockades, wars, and environmental shocks. But if your society is built on universal basic life, where your water, your agriculture, and your energy are deeply tethered to the health of your immediate local environment, you become practically immune to external pressure.
You don't need to conquer foreign territory for resources, because your own territory is endlessly regenerating.
Precisely.
I understand the long-term vision there, but let me play the role of the skeptical defense contractor for a moment.
Bring it on.
In the short term, in the immediate cutthroat sprint of the next 5 to 10 years, if we throttle our AI to protect the water table, and our rival strips all their environmental regulations to maximize compute, won't they achieve a technological breakthrough that renders our resilient little farms completely obsolete?
It's the classic prisoner's dilemma.
Right. Don't we risk getting conquered by a superior technology before the long-term benefits of regeneration ever kick in?
It is the ultimate prisoner's dilemma. And the multitude concedes that yes, in a pure short-term sprint, the extractive model might generate a faster, more powerful AI iteration.
Sounds like two people trapped in a burning bakery.
Okay, I like where this is going.
They are violently fighting each other over the last remaining pie in the display case, convinced that whoever gets the pie wins the game. Meanwhile, the multitude is suggesting that instead of fighting over the pie, one person should walk out the back door, find a patch of dirt, and plant an orchard.
That's a great way to put it.
The guy who stayed inside gets to eat the pie and feels like he won, but 10 minutes later the roof collapses on him.
The analogy holds up perfectly. The multitude is saying that the nation that wins the race to build a superintelligence by destroying its own biosphere will inherit a Pyrrhic victory.
What's the point of winning if you're dead?
Exactly. What good is a godlike AI if the populace is dying of famine, the electrical grids are melting down from extreme heat, and the state is collapsing under the weight of climate refugees?
Right.
The goal isn't to beat the rival nation to the finish line of the extraction race. The goal is to refuse to run off the cliff and to build a vehicle that can actually survive the aftermath.
While the superpowers are busy racing each other toward that cliff, there is a very specific subset of the population that is acutely aware of the impending crash.
Oh, yes.
And they are using their massive resources to build a personal escape hatch. Which brings us to the multitude's brutal critique of the global elites.
The analysis of the bunker and rocket ship class is easily the most vitriolic and, frankly, the most entertaining section of the Pandemonium debate. The maniac really takes center stage here.
The text aggressively zeroes in on the billionaires who are buying up remote land in New Zealand, hollowing out mountains to build luxury concrete doomsday bunkers, or pouring billions of dollars into private space programs aimed at colonizing Mars.
What is fascinating is how the text dissects the underlying psychology and the ultimate goal of this elite survivalism.
Because on the surface, it looks like they are just trying to preserve the human species, right?
But the multitude argues that preserving humanity has absolutely nothing to do with it. They aren't trying to save the living world, and they certainly aren't trying to save the general public.
So what are they saving?
What they are actually trying to preserve is the hierarchical operating system that put them at the top of the pyramid.
They want to preserve the concept of capital, the concept of leverage, and their position as the apex predators of the economic system.
Exactly. The maniac screams in all caps, naturally, that these elites aren't looking for salvation. They are looking for the right to keep playing the same game on a smaller board.
Oh, that is such a powerful line.
They know the global extraction game is ending, so they want to shrink the game board down to the size of a subterranean bunker or a Martian colony.
Where they are still the undisputed kings.
Yes. And a select few security guards and tech workers are their indentured subjects.
The philosophical critique here is that for this class, survival is not a purpose. It is merely a pause.
A pause.
They are hitting the pause button on their own demise while externalizing the catastrophic costs of the collapse onto the surface population. They are using the rest of humanity as a biological risk buffer.
It's incredibly cynical.
So how does the multitude propose dealing with this? Because you can't exactly vote a billionaire out of a privately owned bunker.
No, you can't.
The solution they propose is a policy called the exit tax. And the mechanics of this are brilliant. Walk us through how the exit tax operates.
So, the multitude argues that any entity whose business model or survival strategy requires an exit from the shared biosphere, whether that means sealing yourself in a fortified bunker or launching a rocket to Mars, must pay a 100% regeneration levy on the surface they are abandoning.
A 100% levy?
Yes.
Meaning for every dollar spent on escape, a dollar must be spent on regeneration.
Exactly. The state, or the local municipality, doesn't outlaw space travel or bunker construction.
It's not a ban.
The rule simply states you are completely free to leave, you can build your rocket, but you must leave the surface of the Earth more livable than you found it.
So if you spend $3 billion engineering a closed-loop life support system for a Mars habitat,
you must legally inject $3 billion into engineering and deploying closed-loop water and agricultural systems for the local community hosting your launch pad.
But the enforcement question arises again here. How do you tax an untethered, hypermobile billionaire who hides their wealth in offshore accounts in complex corporate structures?
You tax the physical friction. This ties right back into the local zoning strategy we discussed earlier.
Right.
A billionaire's money might be invisible, but their rocket is not.
A rocket requires thousands of tons of steel.
Exactly. Concrete for the launch pad, massive amounts of rocket fuel, airspace clearance, and a highly specialized physical supply chain.
And a luxury bunker requires heavy machinery, deep earth drilling, and local water tables to supply its filtration systems.
They have to interact with the physical geography.
Right. If they want to launch from Texas, Texas controls the roads the rocket parts travel on. The local municipality controls the water the bunker needs. You enforce the exit tax at the point of physical intersection?
Yes.
If they refuse to pay the regeneration levy, the local water board simply denies the permit to pour the concrete. The rocket stays grounded.
And the psychology behind this policy is what makes it so effective. It forces the elite class to internalize the true cost of the crisis they are trying to escape.
The text points out that the ultimate goal of the exit tax isn't actually to collect the revenue or fund the rockets.
It's not about the money at all.
The goal is to make the surface of the Earth so regenerated, so stable, and so pleasant to live on that the exit options completely lose their appeal.
The goal is to make the bunker obsolete.
Because why would you want to live the rest of your life eating freeze-dried algae in a windowless concrete tube in New Zealand if the world outside is thriving, resilient, and beautiful?
It creates a structural incentive for the most heavily capitalized individuals on the planet to fix the shared environment.
I do want to raise a philosophical counterpoint here, though. Shouldn't we, as a species, applaud innovation and expansion?
You mean like space exploration?
Yeah. Even if a billionaire's motives for going to Mars are entirely selfish and ego-driven, aren't they pushing the boundaries of human engineering? Are they forcing advancements in material science and propulsion that will eventually benefit everyone? Doesn't the exit tax risk suffocating human exploration?
Well, the multitude doesn't dismiss the value of exploration entirely, but they view the current iteration of it as a gross misallocation of vital energy during an active crisis.
It feels akin to a landlord who owns a massive crowded apartment building. The plumbing in the basement has catastrophically failed, the foundation is cracking, and the tenants are drowning in sewage.
Right.
Instead of fixing the pipes, the landlord spends tens of millions of dollars building a state-of-the-art luxury lifeboat on the roof just for himself, so he can float away when the building finally collapses.
That's the exact dynamic.
He might have invented a really cool lifeboat, but he did it by cannibalizing the resources needed to save the building. The exit tax just said, fine, build the lifeboat. But you can't bring the materials up to the roof until you fix the pipes in the basement.
It demands that the foundation be secured before the luxury of escape is permitted.
Which brings us to the profound philosophical question that underpins this entire chaotic pandemonium debate.
The big question.
We have explored the thermodynamic failure of abstract money, the mechanics of tethering AI to the soil, the geopolitical strategies of resilience, and the taxation of the elite escape plans. But the multitude forces us to ask, what exactly is all of this for?
What are we surviving for? If survival is not a purpose, but merely a pause, what is the actual purpose?
This brings us to our final section, and arguably the most moving part of the text, the Boba metric.
The Boba metric. This is where the hedonist archetype finally gets their due.
Throughout all of these intense, incredibly high-stakes arguments about macroeconomic policy and global collapse, the hedonist has been a persistent annoyance, constantly interrupting to ask, does this mean we get Boba?
It really feels like a punchline.
Yeah, like a joke about a generation that can't look away from their phones while the world ends.
But then the tone of the text shifts. The aesthetic, the voice of spiritual detachment and deep focus intervenes. Instead of scolding the hedonist for being shallow, the ascetic validates the question.
The ascetic explains that boba is not just a sugary drink. It is a vital metaphor.
The ascetic argues that boba represents the small, shared, deeply human pleasures that make existence actually worth experiencing. It is the texture of daily life.
The text makes a devastatingly simple point. If the highly engineered post-collapse future being designed by the elite, or even the sustainable future we are trying to build through universal basic life,
Right.
if it cannot guarantee ordinary people access to these small, mundane pleasures, then it is not a future worth surviving into.
It is a radical redefinition of how we measure the success of a civilization. The architect wants to measure success by the durability of the concrete. The pragmatist wants to measure it by military resilience. But the multitude ultimately concludes that the true metric of a successful society is found in the micro details.
The text says that the success of a future is measured in inches. It is measured by whether the local dogs have shade to rest in at 3 in the afternoon.
Yes.
It is measured by whether two human beings can sit outside on a patio, drink a cold boba tea together, and simply exist without feeling the crushing ambient weight of existential dread about the climate or the economy.
It completely rejects the idea of a sterile, hyper-efficient survival. What good is a flawlessly engineered life support system if the life being supported is devoid of joy, art, and community?
Right. The ascetic delivers the final, grounding philosophy of the text. If the soil is alive, the boba will grow.
It is such a vital reminder. We spend so much time caught up in the macro scale abstractions. We debate the megawatt capacity required to run language models. We analyze the zero-sum geopolitical chess matches over semiconductor manufacturing.
We dissect the load-bearing specifications of luxury doomsday bunkers.
And we completely forget the human element. We forget what the infrastructure is supposed to hold.
To use an analogy, it is like spending 5 years and millions of dollars remodeling a house. You argue endlessly with the contractors about the structural integrity of the foundation, the efficiency of the HVAC system, and the wind resistance of the roof tiles.
Right.
But when the house is finally finished and built to withstand a Category 5 hurricane, you realize you completely forgot to buy any furniture.
You forgot the art.
You forgot to hang any art. You forgot to invite anyone over. The house is perfectly safe, but it is entirely unlivable. The boba is the art.
The boba is the art.
The boba, the shade for the dog, the shared moments of peace. That is the reason you want the house to stand up in the first place.
And this is exactly why Gillis Duncan and her jaw harp interruptions are so critical to the architecture of this text. Every time the multitude starts drifting too far into the sterile abstractions of policy and systems engineering, she goes boing and violently pulls their attention back to the dirt.
Back to the inches, back to the dogs.
She forces the macro blueprint to constantly justify itself to the biological reality on the ground.
Because if the blueprint doesn't serve that biological reality, if it doesn't result in a world where ordinary life can flourish, then it isn't a solution.
It is just another slightly more complex form of extraction.
Exactly. So let's pull all these chaotic threads together. We have navigated the screaming, contradictory voices of the multitude, and out of that pandemonium, out of what initially looked like an unreadable, muddy debate, we have actually extracted a remarkably cohesive, aggressive, and actionable vision for the future.
It is a structural blueprint hidden inside a theatrical fever dream.
We started by looking at the thermodynamic failure of abstract wealth, realizing that we have to ditch the fiat band-aid of universal basic income in favor of the concrete biological reality of universal basic life.
We explored the engine required to fund and build that life, the proof of regeneracy, a protocol that forces massive computational power to act as a steward of the local ecology, enforced not by celebrity politicians, but by the unglamorous friction of local zoning boards.
We dismantled the zero-sum panic of the global extraction game, proving that true geopolitical resilience comes from compounding local resources, making a nation uncrushable rather than just heavily armed.
We weaponized the bureaucracy against the bunker class with the exit tax, demanding that the luxury of escape must be purchased by funding the regeneration of the surface.
And finally, we grounded every single one of those massive systemic overhauls in the Boba metric, constantly reminding ourselves that the ultimate goal of all this survival engineering is simply to secure a world where people can enjoy the quiet, shaded moments of an ordinary life.
It is a profound synthesis. It merges complex systems theory, thermodynamics, local politics, and deep humanism into a single, cohesive framework.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. We have spent this entire deep dive talking about massive systemic changes. We talked about trillion-dollar corporate AIs, national governments, and global billionaires. But let's bring this theoretical framework down to the personal, immediate level.
Yeah, let's look at ourselves. If the underlying logic of the proof of regeneracy is that intelligence and compute must actively heal the physical world in order to justify their energetic cost, how does that conceptual framework change how we view our own daily digital lives?
Because every action we take in the digital realm has a physical thermodynamic shadow. Every email you send, every hour of 4K video you stream, and every quick, seemingly frictionless prompt you type into an AI generator requires real energy.
It requires water to cool a server somewhere.
It requires the extraction of rare earth metals for your battery. It impacts the physical world. So the question is, what is your personal proof of regeneracy?
It is an uncomfortable but necessary inquiry. How do we ensure that the convenience and agency we extract from the digital cloud is being balanced by a regenerative contribution to the ground beneath our feet?
How can you, in your own life, ensure that your footprint in the digital world is actively watering the soil in the physical world? Maybe it means prioritizing local community engagement over endless scrolling. Maybe it means looking at the physical supply chain of the convenience you consume.
It's about being aware.
Because if we step back and look at the lessons of the multitude, it becomes clear that we don't need a perfectly pristine, friction-free spreadsheet to save us. The blueprint for survival isn't going to be handed down from a pristine cloud. It is going to be chaotic, it is going to be loud, it is going to be muddy, and it is going to be deeply, fundamentally rooted in the dirt.
Well said.
Thank you for joining this deep dive. Keep questioning the blueprints, keep listening to the noise of the multitude, and we will catch you next time.